Great. Is that better? So we're all good for recording, Donald?
Yeah, all good.
Excellent, excellent. Well, first of all, I'd like to welcome Donald. Donald is not feeling very well, so I really appreciate the fact he's dragged himself off his sick bed. Well, it's 7 o'clock at night there. And he's told me that he'll be gone by 9, or our time, 8 his time, because he's got a very important rugby match to watch.
A football match, it's a soccer match.
Football, soccer, sorry,
Yes.
sorry. Exactly, get it right. So I'm really pleased and thankful that you've come on today. I only sort of have seen your work in the last couple of months, and as you know, it was the L&D Global Sentiment Survey, which I saw and was horrified that we only had 3 people from New Zealand actually voting in that. So that's when we got in contact, and then sort of started to look at some of your work and what you've been doing. So you know, you're right up there with the likes of the Nigel Paynes and Maisies of the world. So really appreciate the fact that you've come on and talking to us here down under. So and I'm sure we'll be able to tempt you down one year to be a speaker at eLearns, which would be fantastic. So look, for those of you that don't know, Donald has been in that learning development for a long time. How many years have you run the Global Sentiment Survey, Donald?
This is only the 4th year of the survey, but it gets bigger each year. Yeah,
I can imagine. It's really great value to the community. So Donald's also the chairman of the Learning and Performance Institute, which is the award that Bloom won last year for the startup of the year. Got second, silver. So he's done a lot, and the Learning Technologies Conference and tech exhibition that we went to last January, which was amazing. If you've ever not got to it, it's worth putting it on your to-do list. He's also the chairman of that. So, so Donald, one of the things that we did talk about was micro-learning. It seems to be been a real trend the last 12 months. So, as well as hearing about the trends globally and also the trends what people in New Zealand think will be the trends, I'd love to hear just sort of what you think micro-learning is and why it's so important and why people are thinking it's so important. And then I'll let you dive into the results of the survey. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Rustika. And yeah, my deck is entitled Top Trends in L&D for 2017. One of the major parts of it is looking at micro-learning, and then we'll have a bit of a focus also on the results we got from New Zealand for this survey as well. So you've done a lovely introduction. I won't introduce myself anymore, besides which who really cares who I am. The key thing is, have I got anything useful to say? Let's hope I have. So my aim is to try to share some stuff that's useful around the world about what people are saying about what's happening in L&D, and help that give something to reflect on in your own practice. So we can look at 5 things. I'm going to talk about the survey as a whole and its results. We'll focus on micro-learning for the second part of this, and we could do Q&A. If you really want to focus on the Rastika, I'm very happy to spend a lot of time looking at that, and then we can skip through some of the rest of it. So let's play that by ear. Very happy to work with the chat. So I hope everyone's got the chat window, and yes, I hope everyone's got the chat window open, and I'm just going to say hi there, and I would love it if people would say hi back. Just so I know you've got it and you're able to interact, because everyone has to be on mute, otherwise it gets noisy. But there we go. Got Esther, got Maury, Rebecca. Oh gosh, everyone's saying hi. That's fantastic. Okay, going to look at winners and losers, an emerging trend, and also what's happening in 2017. We'll look at that as well. All right, let's kick off. First of our things to look at. What are the results for this year? A bit of background to the survey. 4th year we've run it, as I said to Rustika earlier. I asked people to choose from 15 options. They can choose 1, 2, or 3 things they think are important. And they think, the question I asked them is, what will be hot in workplace learning in 2017? I had 885 people vote, casting a total of nearly 2,400 votes from 60 countries. But as you can see there, we've got 5 key regions putting together 93% of the vote. So those 5 regions on there made up most of the vote. Now, that question, I want to just quickly talk about that question for a moment. What will be hot in L&D in 2017? What does it mean? What can we learn from it? And by the way, who are these people? Can we trust them? Firstly, the people. I say that the people are predictive, they're not representative. if you go out and you promote the survey entirely over social media, you're not going to, which is what I do, and by email, you're not going to get a representative sample back. The people I get coming back and responding to the survey are not equally distributed over the technology adoption life cycle, the familiar curve you see there. They tend to be people who are right at the innovative edge of it. So the people responding to this tend to be people who are interested in technology, interested in doing things first, and therefore they're not representative, but they do, I think, they are predictive in the sense that what these people do now tends to be, and this has been borne out by the survey over time, tends to be what other people are doing 2, 3, 4 years down the line. So it's not representative. In fact, we don't even know who these people are. They might not be involved in learning and development, but it would be very strange if people responded without any involvement in L&D. So firstly, the people are who the people are. Secondly, the question, what is hot in L&D, is about sentiment. How do you feel about it? It's not about intent. I'm not asking people, what are you going to be doing this year? The reason is I've tried doing that survey in the past, and you won't be surprised, learning development people always respond saying, I'm going to do more of everything. And nobody ever says they're going to cut back on anything. And so it becomes, if you look at what people say they're going to do each year and what they actually did, there's always a huge disparity. So I just ask people one question: what do you think is going to be hot? And the result is quite interesting. You don't have to take it at face value. You interpret it, you look underneath it, and that's where the interest is. Finally, when I'm doing the analysis, I mean, 850 people is great, but I try always, when I'm talking about a trend, to look at what at least 100 people have said is going to be hot. Because if you cut it into 2 small chunks, you can end up trying to extrapolate some trend from 30 people spread over 5 countries, and that's not really viable. But finally, while the data is incontrovertible, always question the interpretation. So I've got this little sign I've designed saying, caution, interpretational work does apply your own thinking. And I'll throw that up on a couple of slides towards the end where I speculate on what these findings mean. And you may say, Don, that's fine, but you know what? I choose to interpret it a different way. All right, so I've got a question for you guys. Very quickly, if you can just put your answers in the chat window. What do you think is going to be hot? Excuse me. What do you think is going to be hot this year, 2017, in learning and development? It's the same question I asked everybody else. If you were going to respond to this, what would you say? Oh, a chance to have a glass of water. Elizabeth's very quick off the box there. Gamification. Well, have a look at that. Articulate rise. That is very specific, Maury. In fact, I'd like to, possibly if we have time at the end, Rusty, have a little look at a chat with people about why they've chosen particular things here. And if you've got something else to add, please do drop it in. But you may say, Don, I'm not I don't think anything's going to be hot or not. And the use of social media. And thank you. All right. Well, look, if you've got any further thoughts about that, drop them in and I will notice that as I carry on talking. But I'm just going to crack on because, believe me, there's a lot of stuff to get through here. And I want to get more interaction with you, throw more stuff out to you. Social learning and just-in-time learning coming through. Okay, that is interesting. Almost all of these, apart from Articulate Rise, one particular tool, we are going to have a look at. All right, here are the 15 things that I offer people a choice of when I put the survey out, plus there is the other option. So there's 3 new this year, and you can see that it's got an asterisk next to them. You'll see gamifications on there, social learning. Just in time isn't there, but micro learning is, and there's a sort of, there's an overlap definitely between just in time and micro, although just in time manner also comes into, I would say, another category to do with performance support, which we'll look at a bit later on as well. And here are the results. So the results are that, well, you can see them there. I don't have to read a slide to you, for goodness sake, you're intelligent people. One thing about the results that I'd like to draw to your attention is that, and coming back to this business about having to take the data, be cautious about the data, almost 70% of them fall in the top half. So I'm not going to be spending a lot of time dwelling on the bottom half of this table because there the numbers get quite thin. And if somebody moves down or up one place in the bottom half, it could just be a statistical variation. It doesn't mean it's actually something significant. But there are big numbers at the top half of that table there. Okay, so I just want to look at what are the 3 main takeaways, and I'll summarize these up front. If you've got a football match you have to get to, you can get these 3 takeaways and run away, but I hope you'll stick around. Firstly, personalisation stroke adaptive learning became number 1 this year. It was number 2 in the 2 previous years of the survey. There are 2 things about this. Firstly, that it became number 1. Secondly, that collaborative and social learning, which was number 1 for the previous 2 years, dropped down to number 2. It doesn't mean that's not important. On the contrary, I believe it means it's more important, actually, in some ways. I'll explain what I mean about that when I look at that later on. Interestingly, one of the reasons for that being so popular is that personalisation got big votes from Australia and New Zealand. Secondly, oops, no, that's the first one. Secondly, technology remains a hot topic. Well, if you ask somebody what's going to be hot, you expect technology answers to come back. And one of the inevitable things about this was that technology featured quite high on this. Micro-learning, which was 5 last year, it was new last year, number 5, came into number 3.
Documents I sent through was from an older version because I've recently discovered there's actually a new version that was rebuilt when the Onyx updated.
So it's a bit like the old days. We had a phone call, we had a cross wire. We can hear somebody talking in their office about their documents.
Okay, cool. So I'll see you then.
Awesome. Thanks for spotting that.
Okay, well, welcome to the webinar. If you could stick onto mute, that'd be great. Okay, microlearning, one of the top topics that was hot as one of our technology hotspots, but also virtual and augmented reality were hot, also mobile, and also artificial intelligence. What of those were the most important? I'm going to look at technology in a bit of detail later on. Again, there's a bit of interpretation there from me. You may choose to disagree with me. And finally, learning and development apparently is interested in the business. We had these 2 results in the top half, consulting more deeply with the business and showing value. And that looks like good news, doesn't it? Gosh, you know, L&D says it's interested with the business. But developing the L&D function is down to number 13 and has been on a steady downward fall for the past 3 years. So what does that mean? It means that people are interested in having more engagement with the business, but they're not necessarily interested in developing the skills to be able to have that engagement with the business. I'm going to look at that in a bit more detail later on. For me, actually, that's one of the big things come out of this survey. Whoa, okay, and what about New Zealand? Well, I pulled the results out for New Zealand. We had 50 people voting, casting a total of 136 votes, which was fantastic in terms of proportion of the population. Very good. I think beaten by the Netherlands because we had an extraordinary showing from the Netherlands. But this is the first year New Zealand focus. So Rustica hoping for even more people from New Zealand next year. Here's the numbers. Now look, on the right-hand side, I'm just going to use the annotating tool here. On the right-hand side, you can see, excuse me, that you can see that that's what you'd expect. That's the ranking across all countries. So there's a small difference between each of them, and they descend from the first option that people chose, globally, personalization, down to the 5th of the top 5 options, consulting more deeply with the business. However, if you look at the spread for other countries, it is very different for each of them. So Australia, much more uniform about the top 3 and then about the bottom 2 of the top 5. But actually look at New Zealand against the USA. If you wanted to compare the 2 countries, you wanted to say that New Zealand was like something, you wouldn't say it was like Australia, you'd say it was much more like the US in its view of things. And I think that's very interesting because the US is always a leader, as we'll see in a minute, in the adoption of technology. The 2 key things the US led on was personalization and adaptive, and micro-learning being very hot in the US. They were the same hot topics in New Zealand. So I wouldn't have expected New Zealand to lead quite so strongly on technology, but it clearly does. And just here are those numbers broken down for you. And Rustica, I'll get you this deck so you can distribute it over if you want to, so you don't have to scramble, by the way, to write notes. This is here. And also, of course, there's a whole report, 25-page report, which you can download, which I'll give you the URL from at the end. And you don't have to register for it, you don't have to pay for it. It's all free. I ask people to contribute for nothing. I give the report back to people for nothing. I think it's really important to know what else is going on. The key thing for me there is that 2 things which didn't feature on the top 8 elsewhere featured on New Zealand's results, curation and games and gamification. And that, by the way, that result is very different from the rest of the world, which we'll see later on. And microlearning there at the top very strongly. So Rastika, you've got an audience here, you've got people in New Zealand who are clearly very technologically focused, and perhaps at the end when we do our Q&A, we can discuss why we think that is. Let's look at microlearning and its continued success. Very quickly, I need to ask you another question. What do you understand by the word microlearning, or the words microlearning, and how would you use it? So everyone means different things by this. I've had a very long-running conversation with some people on LinkedIn about this. I'll give you my definition in a minute, but just let me know what you think you understand by microlearning. It's very hot in New Zealand, but what do we mean by it? What do people mean when they say microlearning? Oh, excuse me. All right. So, couple of good answers here. Spaced learning, Rustika leads on that, using tech. I'm going to disagree with him, Rustika. Rob says a distinct little piece of learning intended to develop one particular capability. I hadn't thought about the one particular bit. That's interesting, Rob, and I'd agree. 1 to 10 minutes of video. Anna leading on the video part of this. So did other people, Anna, interestingly, which can be accessed when needed. I'm not sure, says Elizabeth. Small bits of learning pushed out to support a capability, just-in-time performance support, says Rosie. Snippets of information. Fast video with links to deeper details. Well, it's all good. I'm going to give you my definition in a second. I like bite-sized videos / animations from Reagan. A strong emphasis here on the video side of it. And indeed, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. There is definitely a parallel. There's not, I don't think it's necessary, but there definitely is a parallel in most people's minds between microlearning and video. Here's my take on it. I think microlearning it's more than just bits of content chopped up. If you get a course and you chop it up, you get lots of small bits of a course. The key thing for me with microlearning is that you've got, as Rustika said, spaced learning, and it's structured. So you've got stuff that's spread out over time. You've got these bits which are then broken up into lots of bits, and they're spread out over time with a purpose. And the purpose is to develop both perhaps skill, and a lot of people mention skill and capability, but also possibly comprehension, not necessarily, but possibly comprehension as well, in the sense that you build up your understanding of a more complex concept bit by bit. Now, it can also be used for performance support, as you've said here, guys, but I think there's a distinction between performance support and micro-learning. I think you can use some of the same content for both, but I think that business of putting a structure in place where progressively we build on learning bit by bit is different from performance support, which is definitely a one-time hit for one reason. By the way, that graph in the background on that slide, that's the Google Trends report for the words micro-learning, or micro-learning as one word, from February through 2015 through to December 2016. And you can see there, it's got this explosive hockey stick kick up. So it's gone explosive. Why? Why now? Well, it's more effective for organizations because we know that spaced learning is more effective as a way of people remembering things. It's more efficient for the learner because we also know that if you attempt to get people to learn something that is new, doing it in one big lump is a very inefficient way of people learning anything. And it's more convenient if you add technology. Rastika, I said I was going to disagree with you about the technology piece. It's a yes and a no. The reason why this has exploded so much is that we've reached that point whereby we've got great technology in people's hands. You can use your phone now. You pick up your phone and you can use this to access pretty much the sum total of human wisdom on that thing in your pocket. More importantly, you can also use it to run a mini course every, I don't know, a chunk of stuff, 2 to 5 minutes long, and you learn a little bit each day, which builds up your comprehension. Great example of this is the app Duolingo. It's a classic micro-learning tool where you go through perhaps one bit of learning of might be 2 minutes, 5 minutes every day. You build up your vocabulary, and also, this is my point about comprehension, both your vocabulary and your understanding of the grammar of a language. Yeah, it is awesome, isn't it? And my son's off to Italy with his girlfriend a couple of months' time. He's on Duolingo doing his Italian, and he can't stop talking about it. He's 18 and he loves learning his Italian that way. In fact, I can smell the dinner coming up from downstairs. He's not cooked this evening. It's my wife has cooked, and it is in fact chicken parmigiano, an Italian dish. So if you hear my tummy rumbling, that's why. But here's the technology point. Duolingo relies entirely on technology. It's a fantastic tool. It's free. It doesn't have to be that way. On the right-hand side, you've got my own way of learning a foreign language using micro-learning. When I was living in Turkey, in Istanbul, well, not in 2017, but in 1987, I gave myself little chunks of Turkish to learn, 3 of these pages each week. Each page was 15 words or phrases in Turkish. And I would learn the page, and this is where the structure comes in. If you look on the small picture on the right-hand side there, I'd also give myself a structure. I'd revise the words from the previous day, from 3 days ago, from 7 days ago, from 28 days ago. By the time I'd revised it from 28 days ago, I had learnt it. And that worked. Within 2 years, I was doing translating on the side, Turkish to English, as a result of doing that. You don't have to have technology, but you know what? The reason why it's kicked off is precisely because technology, you don't have to have this notebook. You don't have to go through the pain of understanding the grammar and everything else. Duolingo does a much better job for you much faster. So yes, the technology is a good idea. Not strictly necessary, but much better. Rustika, do you want to come back on me? You were very keen on the technology piece and the answer to the question. Do you want to say anything back at me and say I'm wrong?
No, I take your point. No, I do take your point because I was being mentored recently and I was taking notes on the device.
Yeah.
And their comment to me was actually, because of the long human history of writing, actually writing with a pen and paper really does actually embed, you know, something. So
interestingly, note-taking by hand is different from note-taking digitally in one respect. If you're just making notes for facts, no difference. If you're making notes for concepts, you absorb it much better if you've made the notes by hand. And part of the reason is that the motor skills that we have in our hands are in the point of the brain very close to language learning. So there's a lot of speculation that the development of language went hand in hand with tool creation over a period of hundreds of thousands of years, and that's why we were able to develop language, because we developed very fine skills to develop our motor skills. So that's probably why. I don't know. I'm not a specialist in this area, but that's the speculation I've read. All right, let me crack on with this. What I find fascinating about the micro-learning is the way it exploded across the world in a very particular way. So 2016, look at those results there. You can see that this is the share of this is how people voted in each of the regions for micro-learning. You can see in North America out there, so there's Oz and New Zealand, you guys, Europe, India, North America, UK. You can see that it was very hot in North America, where it was the first choice of voters in 2016. Go forward a year, and in 2017, it's exploded everywhere else, but in North America, it's actually, bizarrely, dropped back very slightly. So we can speculate about this, and in fact, I've written a piece on LinkedIn about this, I think last Thursday I put it up. But for me, this shows that the old adage that what happens in the States first then gets picked up by the rest of the world is probably true. Here are the votes, of the 100% of votes that we had for micro-learning spread across the world. In 2016, you can see that in North America, over a third of the votes came from North America. And then the rest was sort of split equally between UK, Europe, and then sort of the rest of the world. This year, very different. The proportion from the US, from North America in particular, has shrunk dramatically, and in the UK a bit. Europe's got interested, Australia and New Zealand are interested too. India's sort of ticking along. So what does this tell us? I think if you're familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, or hype curve, you'll be familiar with this idea that things have a technological trigger, people get very excited about them. And then there's a sort of kick back. People say, well, hang on, it's not that good after all. And they drop down to the trough of disillusionment, then come up the slope of enlightenment. And in the end, we have the plateau of productivity. So things like, for example, Second Life or virtual worlds have this huge peak of inflated expectations back in 2000, I don't know, 3, 4, which plummeted, and they have reached a small plateau of productivity in niche areas. I think the same is true for microlearning. I think microlearning is fantastic. And I think that the different regions show themselves to be in different places on this. We are in the UK probably coming down the side slightly of this. The US is already on North America is on its way down. I think next year I'm confident that actually India will show more interest in microlearning, because I think that's just the way it goes. I do believe, though, that it is such a valuable way of learning that after it's hit that bottoming out, people will say, well, okay, it isn't the answer to everything. Guess what, people? Nothing ever is, and especially in the world of learning, but it does have its uses. I think it has a very, very wide range of uses, unlike Second Life. It can be used, I've seen it used very effectively in retail. I've seen it used very effectively in pharma. I've seen it used effectively in manufacturing. So there are lots of different ways in which microlearning can be used. And so I'm confident it will pick up again and hit the plateau of productivity. The problem is, for microlearning, it's very easy to bandy the world around. If you say, oh, we're doing microlearning, you can say it and you can claim you're doing it just because you're doing a bunch of videos of 2 minutes long. According to my definition, you're not, because what you're not doing is providing that structure. You're just throwing out a bunch of content. So I think that difference for me is, that point, it means that a lot of people can jump on that micro-learning bandwagon. Inevitably, when people do that, you get the backlash when people say, well, all you're doing is, guess what, providing chopped up content. So I think for me, that's the core of the, excuse me, the story about micro-learning. Rastika, I know you're very keen on this, you want to focus on it. Is there anything else that you wanted to dwell on in this particular part of our session together?
No, I think that's great, and I really like the way you've plotted those dots on there too. It'll be interesting to see next year's like a plot again next year.
Yeah, you're holding me now to that. It's terrible. So next year I'm going to come here, and you're going to say, "God, I remember last year. It's nothing like this. What's happened?" And I'll be revealed for the fraud I am. Yes, let's see. Let's see. We'll pick it up next year.
You'll have an insight about it, I'm sure.
Let's see. I'm pretty confident they'll be coming down. But the other question, of course, is then what's going up? Oh gosh. You know, I could talk about this all day long. Let's crack on, because there's a lot of other stuff which we can get through. Winners and losers sounds a bit dramatic, doesn't it? I'm not sure that this is people are really winning if they're going up, but people tend to think they're winning if they're going up the table. It's more complicated than that. So let's have a look. So what are the results spread over 3 years here? And as I say, if you download the report, it's actually you get all these tables and more in it. So the first thing to notice is it's the year of personalization question mark. So we've got it in second place, personalization, adaptive delivery, and then it's in first place. By the way, when I say personalization, what I mean is personalization is the selection of stuff that's right for you. Adaptive delivery is when what you're doing changes during the course of you doing it. So you might have a course that was personally selected for you, and then you might have adaptive delivery of that course. It changes the way the content is displayed or put over in response to the way you interact with the information or the material. So that's leapt up, and consulting more deeply with the business has dropped down. I'm going to look at that in a bit more detail. Here are those numbers for 3 years. It doesn't really matter what the numbers are. You can look those up in the tables that I'll give you in the report. The key thing here is the trend, that we've got collaborative on the way down and personalization on the way up over the course of 3 years. If it was just a blip, I wouldn't draw so much attention to it. This is clearly an ongoing trend that you can see. What does this mean? Is it just being led by one particular region? No, it's not actually. This is pretty much spread over all the regions. So firstly, if you look at the option across all the regions, you can see there that uniformly, apart from Europe, interestingly enough, personalization beats collaborative. Well, actually, that's not true. So in India either, but it's true in areas where we've got the most people, which is why in North America and UK, when you've got a lower vote, a much lower vote for collaborative, it's been held back. And so if you think about the hype cycle, what's happening is that America and UK down the side coming into the trough, where they're starting to say, well, this is no longer something I'm excited about so much. Remember, the question is, what will be hot next year? That doesn't mean it's not important. I want to come back to that in a second. And if you look at the change over the previous year, you can see that, and this is important, really, that personalization and adaptive has leapt forward in each of the regions apart from Europe, whereas collaborative has dropped back. So you can see here there's a real shift away from collaborative towards personalization. What does that actually mean? To me, it means that collaborative and social learning is not what people think is hot. And what that means is, if you think about these people being at the beginning of the technology adoption life cycle, it means that the people who are the early adopters and the innovators now recognize that collaborative and social learning is business as usual. It's part of the course, it's what they expect to do. In other words, I believe everyone was right when they wrote social learning is going to be hot this year, but it's going to be hot in the sense that we are now expected to do it. We are expected to do it ourselves. We're expecting to make it something that happens. Now, when you expect that you have to do something, when it's part of the course, then you don't think it's hot. And that's why it's dropping down slightly. Bear in mind, we've been thinking about this since 2006 when J. Cross wrote Informal Learning, Refining Our Natural Ways of Learning. In contrast, personalization and adaptive delivery is something we've thought about for a long time. It's something which has a great deal of potential. It's something which finally, with algorithms and so on, if we look at Google, it really looks like something that we could really do something with if only we knew how. It's exciting, it's new, we don't know really how to implement it, and that's why that's rising up, because that's the characteristic of something that's hot. It's got that sense of the next new coming thing, which we haven't quite seen how to do yet. So I'm not by any means dissing social and collaborative learning when I say this. What I'm saying is, on the contrary, this is now stuff which we think we should be doing, and quite rightly. And I also think the personalization has huge potential, which we'll probably look at in a minute when we get to the end. All right, so who are the winners? The winners are the ones that went up. Microlearning went up, which was extraordinary because it did very well last year, got into the top 3. And showing value went up as well, which I was very surprised about, because showing value had been on its way down. For me personally, that's great. I think showing value and being part of the business is crucial. Now, these two holding, very important. Curation. We had curation mentioned earlier, something was hot. I was predicting that it was on its way down, because normally when things start going down on this list, they keep going down. But it's held up this year. Why? I think because curation is something which we now are finding ourselves having to do more of, because increasingly, with social learning becoming part of the way of doing things, we're generating a lot more user-generated content. Video, similarly, is holding up. I expect it to go down. Why? Well, as we mentioned earlier, everyone was mentioning microlearning hand in hand with video, and I think people are doing a lot more video because of microlearning. They're also doing a lot more video in a different way. They're doing interactive video. It's something that's cropped up more than once in conversations with people. I travel, I talk, I try to catch up with people as much as possible. The interactive video, where you don't simply start here and end there, but you have a branch of when you make your way through, is increasingly popular. So now people are saying, remember, the characteristic of something that's hot is it's interesting, it's new, and I don't quite know how to do it. A lot of people feel that way about interactive, and that's another reason for supporting it. Well, okay, we had the winners, we had the people who are holding. What about everybody else? Well, there were 5, or if you like, 4.5 things that were losers on this list. But if something's going down the chart, I tend to say that's for one of 2 reasons. It's either because it's become business as usual, something which we're used to doing, and I mentioned that phrase earlier with collaborative, or it's because it's become just a bit too complex to do. And you can see here, these are the 3 positions for the past 4 years. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner here that the positions refer to 2015, 2016, 2017. They're all falling down. Mobile delivery is just what we do now. I mean, nobody would think, if they were doing any form of corporate learning, I don't think, that something shouldn't be available via a phone or a a pad or something. The other stuff on the right-hand side, too complex is perhaps a glib way of putting it, but I find it difficult to find any way of doing, any other way of describing it. Brain science, or cognitive/neuroscience, isn't perhaps too complex to understand. There are some things like spaced learning or retrieval practice, which are incredibly simple to understand and very powerful, but we don't do them. We don't do them not because they're too complex to understand, but because I think they're too complex to implement. They're just a bit too hard to make it happen with the structure of course development we tend to have. Ditto, gamification. Gamification can be incredibly powerful, but you know what? Implementing it is just a bit hard with the structure of ways of doing stuff we tend to have, which is largely courses. And the same is true for developing the learning and development function. The idea that we should train ourselves to get better at something, it shouldn't be difficult. We're L&D people, we should be doing it. We don't think it's hot. We don't think it's hot. Why? Well, it isn't sexy for sure, learning stuff yourself to make yourself better. Well, I think it is, but I think a lot of people don't think it's sexy. But I think practically speaking, it's difficult, it's too complex, because we don't have the time and the resources often to get our people up to speed, which is sad. But lots of people I've spoken to have said that's the reason. And it's also the reason for MOOCs. MOOCs is the one I find most incomprehensible of all of this. Excuse me. Massive open online courses. These are free resources, often from experts in their field in the world, making stuff available for free. But when I talk to people about this, I've again stuck something on LinkedIn about it. It was extraordinary, the reaction from people saying, yeah, it's all very well, but I don't have time to work out how to use this stuff. So again and again, when I say too complex, I'm not saying people aren't smart enough to understand it. What I'm saying is it's too complex to fit into the way we live our lives as L&D people. I think that's sad, but from what I'm getting, talking to people, that's how it happens. Right, let me move on to an emerging trend. I asked people the other question, what else should be on this list? And I couldn't really see a pattern. Excuse me. 58 people, I think, responded, but I couldn't see a pattern. Then I did the old word cloud thing, and this is what came up. And if you look at the word cloud, it's interesting. So you should never say something's interesting as a presenter, because you can't put yourself at the feet of the audience. I found it interesting. You may not, but looking at that, I saw things pop out at me. Performance, and we had a lot of people mention performance earlier on. Business support, integration, workplace, analytics, work. The sense that, you know what's hot, or what people want to see included on the list, is something to do with business. And so if you look at some of these comments I then picked out, people were talking about performance, which we had mentioned earlier on, strategy, integration, and that I'm delighted to see that, this sense that people really want to get learning and development more integrated into the business. And it sort of ties in with those stats that we found. If you remember, we had these three things about L&D being tied in with the business. So at number 5 and number 6, we had people voting for showing value. And those that voted for showing value, interestingly, of those people, 16% also voted for consulting more deeply with the business. So there's some correlation there. There's a strong tie-in between the idea that if I consult, I can show value, and that will help me do a better job. But on the other hand, down here at the bottom, of the people who voted for showing value, only 5% also voted for developing the learning and development function. That's pretty sad. Unless, of course, they already know how to do it, in which case they think they don't have to develop. And in my experience, that's not the case. I'm doing a talk in a couple of weeks' time about what's happening in L&D at the moment with PwC. PwC have a team, now of course they're a multinational, successful organization, but they have a team whose only job is to develop the L&D function. And they're very good at that already. They already do consulting, but they get better at it by continuing to develop. So for me, I have to ask myself, now this is my interpretation, got the big yellow triangle, or it should have, is this business of wanting to be integrated with the business, is it a bold ambition, or is it a vague aspiration? Something we'd like to do if we had time, if we could get around to it. I rather sense it's just a vague aspiration. Right, what are we going to expect next year? More speculation from Dom. Right, here's the technology bit, which I said we were going to look at. We had virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, all of them featuring quite highly at the 4th and 8th position. There's a whole table there. I'm not going to read it out to you, but I think what's interesting here, you know, virtual reality basically is putting yourself in an alternative environment. Augmented reality is putting an alternative view on top of your existing environment. And artificial intelligence is the use of algorithms and software to help you do things better without you genuinely knowing about it. Like Google, for example, uses a stack of AI to help you find the things that you are probably going to find most valuable for yourself. Ditto Netflix, Amazon, Yahoo. Not Yahoo, sorry. Use cases there you can see for artificial intelligence, just providing a better choice of things faster. So now these people are saying this is going to be hot, but interestingly, not in the US typically. So in the US, microlearning was hot, other things were hot, but not these two. Remembering microlearning's explosion, I'm not so sure this is going to explode in the same way that any of these three will explode like microlearning did last year. Interesting, I read something by Ryan Tracy just this morning that said exactly the same thing. So I'd go and check it out. It's on Twitter somewhere. I took up Ryan and VR and AR. The blockers are too high. Remember, with microlearning, anybody can say they do it, even if they're not. You get something big, you chop it up, hey, microlearning. Virtual reality, you need to have a whole bunch of kit, you've got to have some software, and you have to have people who can develop things. Now, you can do that, and I've seen people do it. There's a great case study from Australia, developing an onboarding course that's a 7-minute bit of content that puts people into the working environment, and people can see what they're going to work like, and the guy shot it, put it all together in 4 hours. Great. Most people don't have those skills. And I think the cost of the technology and the lack of the skills and development is going to slow that down. Ditto AR. Augmented reality will have the same problem. Artificial intelligence, strangely, I think the development skills are more widely spread for that. But they're not widely spread in learning and development. That's the kicker. And I think we're going to see growth with AI this year, but we'll see it from software companies outside the L&D space. With virtual reality and augmented reality, we will see growth and we'll see success in niche areas, but I don't see these as being explosively popular this year. I should have my yellow triangle here. Is it here? Yes, that's my interpretation, folks. Remember, apply your own thinking. Okay, you've got to wrap up, right? I asked a question, I get 850 something people responding. I have to boil it down to one slide and 3 points. That's the world of research. 3 things. Firstly, personalization will be hot this year as we strive to do it. Social and collaborative will be hot as we embed it in what we do. There will be technology tussles. Why did I choose a word you can't say? There will be technology tussles this year. Microlearning will continue to be hot. There will also be a backlash, definitely, because as things start coming down that curve, especially in the US, you can expect people to push back, even though it's being used for valuable stuff, frustratingly. Mobile delivery will be there because it's what we all do. Those 3 things we just talked about, well, which one of those is going to deliver and when? I don't think it's going to happen this year. Business and learning and development. Well, you're in the field, you know how that works. I'd love us to be consulting, I'd love us to be showing value, but more than anything, I'd love us to be developing ourselves in those areas. Without it, my fear is it's a pipe dream. Let's see. That is the results of my survey, boiled down to 45 minutes of talking and listening and interaction. Thank you very much, everybody. I always say, look, it's the end of a presentation, but it's the beginning of a conversation. Let's chat now. Let's keep the chat going. As you can see on that slide, I'm Donald H. Taylor on everything, Twitter, Google Mail, LinkedIn. And that's the URL. Rustika, could you tap that into the chat so people can have it? It's donaldhtaylor.co.uk/GSS for Global Sentiment Survey. And so if you want to go there, you can download this year's report and last year's report for free. And also listen to another webinar of me talking about it, which you probably don't want to do. Rustika, did we have any questions coming in there that you picked up on, or any thoughts, or do you have anything you want to throw at me that says, Don, it's all very well, but you're talking rubbish, and I think this is true.
Well, I think you covered off the microlearning really well. I thought that was awesome, and particularly about what it is and what it's not. I really like that. That it is about that.
I should say there's no universal definition. So this is bear in mind that other people may differ. However, some of those things are common threads across other people's definitions. So it's not just me saying that. But I think it's important. It's not just things sliced up. Sorry, I interrupted you, Rastika.
Yeah, no, that's good. Appreciate that. And I think your final point is one thing I've been sort of talking about over a long period of time is L&D really trusted advisors in the business, and so often the businesses tell me, like senior management will say, they're not. So I think your survey is really interesting, and what you just, that last slide, that it really rests on us as practitioners to have the skills and the mindset to actually go out there and not just get the L&D skills, but get the business acumen.
Oh, right. Okay. I've got to start on another one now, because you've absolutely opened up a whole bunch of stuff there. Look, I've just finished this book, and here's a shameless bit of self-promotion. That's me holding a book. I've been writing it, and I've said Don's finally finished it, because it took me a long time to write this book about technology, because I realized I was heading down the wrong way. I ripped the middle of the book out and rewrote it. You said skills and mindset. I'm totally with you on that. So in this book, what I'm talking about is that there are 4 things that make up successful implementation. They are having the right aim, having a people focus. In fact, I've got a LinkedIn about this coming out tomorrow. So you have to write notes. Just read it.
Reshare it. Yeah.
You've got an aim. You've got a people focus. You've got a perspective, and you've got an attitude. Now, the aim and the people focus are things you can sort of develop skills in. You have to have the attitude in the first place to do it, but there's sort of things you can develop skills in. Aim, well, it's really a matter of doing the right performance consulting, the right listening, the right identification of stakeholders, and so on. Okay, Rastika, there's a long thing that looks very interesting. Could you just read it? Because I think that's probably worth a shout out. The other 2 things to do with, excuse me, oh dear, perspective and attitude are much more a matter of mindsets, much more a matter of people adopting the sense that they want to go out and learn, as you were saying, Rastika, about stuff outside their own field. And for me, the perspective thing is crucial. It's a matter of being able to say, I want to learn about learning outside my business. I want to learn about what's happening in the business inside and what's happening in the business outside the business. So there's a 2x2 grid there of the things we should be thinking about, and we tend to be stuck in one corner of it, only thinking internally about learning. Thanks for picking up on that. So I think that skills and mindset, I'm totally with you on that. We have to develop our skills. We also have to have that mindset going into the future. Here's my concern, that until now, we have been a cottage industry of people creating courses. I've been doing this since the mid-80s, creating courses, creating content, delivering it in dots here and there. We are now in a world where everything is very connected, where people can find the information they need very quickly. The role of the learning development changes dramatically to being not the person that's the gatekeeper of knowledge, but rather the facilitator of conversations around knowledge. That helps people not learn something. We can do that, but we can help people develop the skills to learn anything. Now, in that position, people who see themselves as being creators of content, that being our role, have increasingly a niche area of expertise where they can flourish. But if they're competing on a global scale against other people doing the same thing, it's very tough. Whereas if you see yourself as being the provider, facilitator, the conversational expert, the person who helps people learn, that's a different mindset. So I think, Rastika, coming back, sorry, you said 2 words and I've been talking for like 10 minutes about it, but the mindset piece about it is crucial. The L&D people who are going to flourish in the future will be those with the mindset that we are about helping people develop and learn, not the mindset that we're about creating content.
Yeah. He
He says, with a picture of himself holding a bit of content in front of you, what a hypocrite I am. I hope it'll be a useful conversational starter. Any other points that you've got to bring up, Rastika?
I've said any other questions. Doesn't look like there's any other questions. So I'll just request the remote back,
Okay, what do I need to do with that? Okay, and I approve that. There we go.
Great. I'm controlling your screen now. Hang on.
That could be very dangerous.
Oh, that's it. Share screen. You cannot. Okay, that's right.
But do I have to stop share?
Yeah, stop share. That would be good.
Okay. There we go. That's you.
Okay. That's perfect. That's good. So I'll just show it. Well, hey, look, thanks for that. That was just, I've taken heaps of notes here, and I think really in line. I think that book looks awesome. So I'm going to be certainly jumping off and purchasing that. That's for sure. I'm just going to remind everybody of the we've got, so basically what we're doing with these web events is having a web event with an expert such as yourself, and in the next month we actually get people in New Zealand who are actually doing that. So talking to people about who's actually using microlearning and how they're doing it, showcasing that in Auckland and Wellington. So I just want to share dates with everybody. Hang on a second. Sorry. Share screen. Okay, should be sharing my screen here. Down here. Okay, so slideshow, if I can start. So this is our full calendar. It's on our website, bloomlearningtechnologies.co.nz. You'll see here that we've got the Auckland and Wellington events, 8th and 9th of March. I'm having real trouble finding speakers for that, interestingly, so it's a trend, but I've only spoken to one person. He's with Hewlett Packard doing some really interesting stuff, but they need to get permission. So if anyone else can, do that, so we'll meet in person and have that showcase.
Rasika, could you mail me to remind me? Because my son is about to walk into this room with a bottle of beer for me. I'm about to go downstairs and watch the football, but I may have a case study for you. So could you mail me just to remind me about that?
Perfect, that'll be great. Absolutely, excellent. Thanks for that.
Sure.
Go for some beer, that sounds like a good thing. So yeah, for those of you that are in Wellington and Auckland and would like to catch up in person and actually hear actual cases of microlearning in New Zealand, that would be really great. So that's essentially it for the day, so thank you.
Hold on a second, here it is. There we go. I'm ready, I'm all ready for the footy now. So guys, it's been lovely to be with you. I can't believe that timing. It's been lovely to be with you. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward, as I say, end of the presentation, beginning of the conversation. Sorry, Rusty, get back to you.
That's good. So if you can just end the meeting for us all, that would be good, and that will end the recording. That'd be great.
Okay, how do I do that? Where is it?
Bottom
Stop
right.
recording.